get your interest. We wanted to share with you some information from 3 different departments about how we go about our day-to-day work, and which is trying to prepare students to be college and career ready. A couple months ago, we were able to have 3 meetings that involved us looking at our general budget, and we went line by line. Now we want to take this opportunity to look deeper into 3 different departments and give you a better perspective of the financial challenges along with the day-to-day challenges that we meet within these specific departments. And there'll be child nutrition, transportation, and planning and construction. And so at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Sonia Bales, our public relations liaison, and she'll get us started. And once again, thank you for being here.
Thank you. As Mr. Downey just mentioned, we're going to be taking a deep dive tonight into 3 specific departments, those being child nutrition, transportation, and planning and construction, and we welcome your participation. We are respectful of your time. Again, we appreciate you coming out here on your Tuesday evening, so we are going to try our best to keep this pretty fast and have you out of here in approximately an hour. Now, at the end of each department's presentation, you will have the chance to ask questions related to those specific topics. Personnel questions will not be entertained because the goal of this forum is for this to be informational, giving our community a bird's eye view of these specific departments. Now, you may have already written a question and slipped it in the comment box that was outside in the foyer when you came in. Another way, however, for you to be able to engage this evening is to pull out your cell phone. I know we all have it on us, and just go to that website right there, slido.com/BPSB, all caps, Town Hall. And when you get to that, you will see an informational field, and you'll be able to type your question in, and then we'll be able to have that to answer as it pertains to that specific topic that's being addressed at the time. So without further ado, let's get started, beginning with our Child Nutrition Department. Carla Horton is supervisor of Bossier School's Child Nutrition Department. So if you will, please help me welcome Carla Horton.
I'm going to put my timer on here. It is such a pleasure to be here this evening. Thank you so much, members of the board, President Cheatham, Vice President Bamberg, Superintendent Downey, Sonia, and just the public. We appreciate you coming to listen to us and to find out a little bit about maybe a department that you might not be as familiar with. So what I want to go over tonight is, what is it that child nutrition does? What are the required regulations that we have to follow? What are the changes that we've made in our department recently? What challenges that we face? And then provide you with contact information so that if you have any other questions, you can let me know if you don't ask them at the end of my presentation. So what is it that we do? We provide breakfast and lunch every single school day of the year. Additionally, we also provide seamless summer options for summer school and some of the migrant foster programs that happen during the summer in our school district. We do this at 34 different locations. 15 of them are CEP schools, which I'll explain in the next slide, and 18 of them are non-CEP schools. And if you look at that, it doesn't always add up, and that's because Benton Middle right now has 2 campuses, so we are feeding on both campuses because it's not feasible to filter that many children through just one cafeteria. We have about 250 employees. 28 of those positions are part-time. They are not always filled, and that also includes my central office and our warehouse that is located in Benton. You may have heard of CEP before, but do you really know what it means? CEP stands for Community Eligibility Provision, and that is a state program that makes a school eligible for free and reduced meals. And the way that a school gets deemed a CEP school is by an individual percentage of students that receive SNAP benefits, which is Louisiana food stamps, the TNAF, or if they are a homeless migrant or foster child. There's an individual percentage that comes with each school, and if it meets a certain threshold, then they are deemed a CEP school. It's important to note that that information does not include free and reduced meal applications. It is only from those identified student percentages. And then the entire school receives free meals, and that's breakfast and lunch every day. So these are our CEP schools. They are the same that they've been for 3 years, with one exception. This year we added Houghton Elementary, so now we have 15 schools. And for your reference, these are all of the non-CEP schools that we serve. So how many meals do we serve per day, per year? Does anybody have any guess? It's a whole lot more than I thought when I took over this department. We actually serve about 15,000 meals per day. Breakfast is about 4,000 of those, and the rest is 11,000 is for lunch. So monthly, it's about 250 to 290,000 meals, and annually that equates to 2.6 to 2.6 million meals. And keep in mind that's served just 9 months out of the year, and that's what, 174, 178 days depending on the school year. So it's a whole lot of meals. I know Thanksgiving is coming up and you're going to be cooking, but I don't know that anybody's ever cooked for this many people at 34 different locations. So we are very busy, and it is very challenging to run 34 different locations and make sure that everybody has what they need so that we can do our jobs well. Now, I'm proud to say that the school year of 1920, we have seen a major increase in participation. In September, which had 20 school days, we served 315,000 meals. And in October, which only had 17 school days, we served 267,000 meals. So that equates to 500 more meals per day. So in October, that was almost 16,000 meals in 1 month. And again, that's in 17 days. So we are projected as a department this year to increase by 85,000 meals per day. Per year, this year versus last year. So that is a big increase, and that is what we want. Our goal is to feed more kids. Research studies show if kids are fed, they are going to learn better. And so when my department does their job, then it enables the teachers and the administrators to do their job better. So what changed? Why did we see this increase? Well, when I took over this department, July 31st of last year, it was baptism by fire because we were full speed ahead into the new school year, and I wanted to learn everything that I could about this department. So I started asking lots of questions. I think my department, I must have asked why a million times. They threatened to give me a t-shirt that said, "Why? Show me. Where does it say that?" But I wanted to know, what does the public think? What do the students think? What do the administrators and the parents think about school lunch in Bossier Parish schools? And so, together with the technology department, I did a Google form survey and sent it out to everyone. We even had a news promo about it to try and get as much feedback as we possibly could. So you talked and we listened. And so we evaluated the menus and we did a lot of revisions. We changed to a 3-week menu cycle versus it was a 2-week before. And then we also made an option for the employees and visitors that they could buy a la carte, meaning they could just come and buy an entree and not have to buy a full meal. So it was a lot more affordable for them because a lot of them didn't want the full meal. They just wanted to have a different option. But it was a big challenge. Let me go back. I tell you what, let me go back here. The big challenge is we have to follow all of these regulations. We are governed not only by state LDOE, but also USDA because we are federally funded. So we have restrictions because of the Healthy Kids, Hunger-Free Kids Act, calories per grade, per school level, fat, sugar, and salt requirements. They have to be low. It has to be whole grain. And you also have to serve an increased amount of fruits and vegetables. So anyone who has a school-age child or any child knows that that is a big challenge to be able to do. We have to follow the regulations. We had to make it appetizing and look good to the kids. It had to taste good. It had to be affordable and feasible for our department to produce. And then we also wanted to prevent burnout. We didn't want to just find 3 or 4 items that the kids liked and keep repeating them because then they would get sick of it. So we decided, myself and my entire team decided that we were going to opt for higher quality foods and name brands that the kids would recognize. Things like Tyson, Jimmy Dean, Kellogg's, Kraft, Heinz, Wild Mike's, General Mills. However, because of the National School Lunch Program and the popularity of school lunch, there are a lot of special versions of these foods that meet the requirements for school lunch and school breakfast, but we can still serve them to the kids. So they have the whole grains, the reduced fat, the reduced sodium, the reduced sugar, but the kids know and love those brands, and so they don't realize that it is a special school food item. So we had healthy options that were kid approved, and so we hit the jackpot. We did a lot of taste testing as well. We went to elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. I can look in the audience and see we divvied out samples to kids, to friends' kids, to neighborhoods, to get it to make sure that it wasn't just that we liked it, that the kids actually liked it as well. And so as you can see, our participation level has reflected that it has been well accepted. And so it's going to be an ongoing process that we're going to monitor to see if they like it. We also have gotten a lot of feedback from teachers, from parents, from students, and administrators that they have seen a big increase in people participating in school lunch. So that makes us really happy because we're able to meet the needs of the parish, but also keep things exciting. Fruits and vegetables, that can be a not so much fun thing for kids to have to eat their vegetables, but we found things that the kids will like. They will eat cucumbers and cherry tomatoes. They will eat carrots. They will eat a salad if we have a great salad dressing to go with it. We also try to get seasonal fruit and vegetables so that it's ripe, it's more economical to be able to buy those types of foods. And we buy those from one of our local vendors here around town. Our program does what's called offer versus serve, and it serves two purposes, pardon the pun. It gives kids choices, and it also reduces waste. So we offer all 5 of these meal components, a meat or meat alternative, which is your protein, grains, fruit, vegetables, and milk. The kids have to take 3 out of those 5 components, and one of them must be a fruit or a veggie. Okay. They can take all 5 if they want. They can take 3, they can take 4, they can take 5, but they have to take 3 out of those 5 components. And we religiously make sure that they do that because we do not get reimbursed if they do not get a reimbursable meal that has 3 of these 5 components. And so our cashiers and our cafeteria ladies are trained to look and say, wait, you need something else, to make sure that they're getting a well-rounded, nutritious meal and that we'll get reimbursed for it. So what if you have a kid that has a special diet or an allergy? We do accommodate for special diets and allergies. However, we require a physician's prescription. You can find that on the website. If you go to Bossier Parish website under nursing and special forms, there's a special diet form. And if you get that filled out by your physician, turn it into the nursing department. We communicate and work together well, and we will make sure that there is a stop on your child's meal account when they go to check out. It says allergy, lactose intolerant, any allergy that they may have. And in addition, I am a dietitian, and so that makes my job very easy because if they have any type of medical problems or things that they need special diets, I can help with that as well. This is our website, and I've kind of highlighted parts of it. The first part with the 4 icons is actually on all of the Bossier Parish websites, and all the way to the right is a menu link. And that hyperlink will take you to our menus where we provide a PDF for the month's menus. And then also, if you're high tech and you like Google, you can subscribe to a Google Calendar. So if you have a child that's in elementary school or high school, you can put that on your phone or their phone, and they can see every day what is going to be for lunch. My kids come downstairs every morning, Mama, what's for lunch? I'm like, I don't know, let's check. And we pull it up on the phone. So that's just something that's easy, and it can always be with you if you don't have time to print out a PDF. In addition, our website has an application for, or a link to the free and reduced lunch applications and to the My School Bucks website and app. So you can access those on our websites in addition to all of the different forms and resources that you may need for nutrition. I will add just a random note. We do have one of our staff speaks fluent Spanish. So if you have a family that may need some help, she really helps us out with a lot of our Spanish-speaking students to be able to help them out because they don't always understand some of the forms. Okay. So what are our challenges? One of our main challenges is retaining part-time employees. They work little hours. It's usually only a 4-hour shift, and they work for very little money. They are usually waiting to try to get into a full-time position. However, I only have a set amount of full-time positions, but we do need more hands because at that mealtime, if you've ever been to a cafeteria, in 20 minutes or less, you've got to serve 200 to 300 kids. You need lots of hands to keep going. So that is a big challenge, is to keep and retain part-time employees without a high turnover. In addition, if employees are absent for whatever reason, that is a big challenge because, again, we need hands to prepare and serve. We do work together as a team, and we do have a policy and protocol, whereas if you have so many workers that are short, we send out an SOS and we start moving people from school to help to make sure that we can feed the kids because, again, that is our main goal, is to feed kids every day for every meal. I've already discussed the menu requirements and things that can be challenging, but then there are also a lot of other types of rules and regulations that we have to follow. And I have to highlight Ms. Carrie Douglas, who is our Chief Purchasing Officer, because she is my right-hand woman when it comes to doing all of our bids and making sure that we are getting the best products at the best price and that everybody is honoring things. So she's been very, very helpful, and I'm appreciative of her help. Now, last but not least, one of my biggest challenges is meal debt, okay? And that is an ongoing problem here in Bossier Parish, but we are not alone. We are in very good company because it is actually a national problem. I don't know if you pay attention to national news and if you've seen a lot of the issues with lots of school districts who have ongoing and accumulating meal debt that rolls over. In Bossier Parish, starting in August 18, when I took over this department, there was a zero balance. It was zeroed out. It wasn't that it was zero, it was zeroed out. That's a whole nother presentation. But last year at this time, it was about $50,000. Our meals cost, breakfast is $1.35, and our lunches are $2, $2.10, or $2.20. So $50,000 is a lot of unpaid meals. And so that is where we were sitting last year at this time. However, we made some changes in the department, and we were able to get someone to help us in my department to constantly help to collect on those. And so we are now sitting at $67,000, and that is just from our non-CEP schools. So if you think about it, that's only 18 schools that have accumulated this much debt. So we are stopping the bleeding. We are doing everything that we can by sending out O letters, which are nicknamed blue slips because they're on blue slips of paper. We send those out twice a month. We text regularly balances and reminders. We also make phone calls for large balances. But a lot of people have a misconception that you do not have to pay your lunch bill, but it is not an option. Those bills need to be paid. Anyone who thinks they might qualify for free and reduced lunch, you can apply at any time throughout the year, and we have links on our website, and also my office can help walk somebody through that application if needed. Payments can be made in the cafeteria. They also can be made in My School Bucks. They have a website, and they also have an app. And I want to point out that My School Bucks is not just for payments. My School Bucks can show you what your child is eating. I have a good friend that said, "Why is my child's meal balance so high?" I said, "Well, let's pull it up." Well, because Johnny is eating multiple entrees every day because he is a growing high school boy. And so that is why his meal was $7 instead of $2, because he got 3 meals or 4 meals instead of 1. So it just will show you that if your child is buying something extra or buying things, and it will help you keep track of the balance. There is no charge for the My School Bucks unless you make a fee, and that is done. That doesn't go to Bossier Parish, that goes to the My School Bucks app. And if you have any questions, you can call Ms. Edna Sanchez in my office, and we'll be happy to help explain anything or help you with anything. So in conclusion, our goals are to provide tasty and nutritious meals, Obviously, we want to make sure that we are following all of our regulations and requirements. And then the also goal is the cafeteria is kind of the hub of the school. A lot of times, the cafeteria ladies see more students per day than anybody because everybody comes through. And so offering smiles, some encouragement, maybe if a kid's having a bad day to check on them, that is a huge service that those ladies provide because sometimes that's the only smiles and the only things is what we provide as Bossier Parish employees for some of these children. So our goal is to be a shining light in the parish and to nourish kids so that they can do better in the classrooms and so that all the hard work that the parish puts towards our curriculum and our teachings will get the best fruit, pardon the pun, out of our kids. And that concludes my presentation. This is my office number and my email. So I would love to answer any questions. We're very transparent. Sonia, I don't know if anybody has said any.
You do have a few great
Okay.
information, Ms. Horton. Just a few. One person asked what the percentage is to be deemed a CEP school.
That is not an easy answer. It is generally between 30 and 40%, and it depends on what the other schools are in your district. I work together with Arsenio Anthony with the Homeless Migrant Program, with Mary McNeese, who does all of our free and reduced lunch, and I work with David Hennigan in our accounting department. And so we take the statistics of all the schools, and there is actually a USDA tool that we plug everything in to see how all of the percentages fit in. So it's a group effort. It's always approved by our CFO, and it gets run by our superintendent to make that decision. But it is not set in stone, and we have the option of keeping the same CEP schools for 3 years, or we can change it every year. And so we're constantly looking at those because obviously we want to be able to provide that, and we would like to have more CEP schools. So we're constantly monitoring that data so that we can update it.
You had two questions that are very similar. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, combine the two. One is, how will Bossier Parish feed children if their account balances are depleted? And a follow-up, can we set up a supplemental fund or provide free lunches to children with those negative balances?
We do not deny a meal to a child if they have a high balance. For kindergarten through 8th grade, because that is what Louisiana law says. For high school, we have a no-charge policy. But for the younger kids, nobody's going to get denied a meal. If anyone would love to start a supplemental program or a supplemental and angel fund, anything, we would love to have that. That is something that we would have to be somebody outside to do. And a lot of places around the country are getting those angel funds, which is absolutely fabulous. So we would be open, give you any information, anything that you would need to help to do that. Even if you wanted to, donate granola bars or things for a high school student that may not have it, that they, we've done that and had just kind of like a little stash that we can give out. And so that doesn't happen very often for high school students, but if it does, and a lot of times my cafeteria ladies will say, hey, I'll pay for this and you can pay me back.
And final question, this person said they understand the need for healthier options at our schools, but students are not eating because the food lacks taste and the staff doesn't like cooking the food. However, as you were pointing out, a lot of menu changes have been made this year and lunch participation has increased dramatically.
Yes. My maiden name is Boudreaux, so if I could cook the way I wanted to cook, and add lots of Tonys and lots of butter and lots of fat, we would not have a problem. However, we would have a finance problem because we would not get federal funding, we would not get our healthier meals option, and as you've seen with the amount of meals, even if we get 6 cents per meal for meeting the nutritional regulations, but if you take 2.6 million meals times 6 cents, Ms. CFO, I can see the dollar signs coming out of our eyes. It does make a big difference. And so we are trying our best, and I want you to know that I don't personally think that school meals make kids fat or that it's responsible for the obesity problem, which is why those regulations were put. School meals it doesn't. Sometimes that's the only meal that kids could eat. So if I had my way, I would definitely, cook good home cooking, but unfortunately we have to follow those regulations or we would not be able to stay in business.
Okay. But you're getting the thumbs up from the kids. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you like to write a question or put it up here? Send us, is this the question that was just put in? Could the menu be put on school apps or the actual school website? Is that the question you just submitted? No. If you want to text it, can you text it to us real quick? No. Okay. Do you want to fill out a comment card pertaining to this? Yes, sir. We're asking that you just write out the question or text us the question. And we can give you a slip here real quick. But real quickly while he does that, Ms. Horton, could the menu be put on school apps or the actual school website?
They do have a link on all of the school websites, the little apple. It should be on all of the school websites, and that would be up to the individual schools. They could, and we may be able to make it to where, we can double check, if you know the school, like, let's have it, let us know, we can definitely meet with them, and add it to each school. But it should be, Stuart, shouldn't that careers and things be on each website? Okay. We will work on that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Horton. We're going to get that comment card around to you. But for right now, just for time's sake, we're going to go ahead and introduce to you our next presenter, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Haddon. He is the Director of Transportation, and he's responsible for the hundreds of buses and operators that get our kids to and from school safely each day. So let's welcome Lieutenant Colonel Dave Haddon.
Hey, thank you, folks. I'm going to abbreviate this story. I've told it a couple of times before about my first day of school in September 1968. It was a traumatic day. I couldn't wait for the end of the day to come. When I got on the bus and went home, I remember my bus driver telling me, "David, have a good evening and we'll see you tomorrow." And I told myself, that ain't going to happen. That was a bad day. I went home. My mom said, "Dave, how was your day?" I said, "Mom, wasn't that good. As a matter of fact, I don't think this school's for me and I won't be going back." And I'm glad I did because I had an incredible bus driver. I couldn't wait to see her in the morning. I'll be honest with you, I look forward to really seeing her in the afternoon when I got to go home. But look, we have incredible bus operators in Bossier Parish that do some incredible things for our children to make sure that these students get to school every day. And I'm really, really excited to talk about it. This is our mission, just like Miss Statham was for me. Our mission is to provide safe and timely transportation in a friendly environment that enhances the learning process. You know, when a kid gets on the bus in the morning, they want to see faces like these two bus drivers right here that welcome them on the bus. And then in the afternoon, believe it or not, you know, the last positive thing that a lot of children hear is that bus driver saying, "Have a good evening. We'll see you in the morning." And so I'm just tickled at the 300 plus employees that we have in our transportation department. This is some of our key facts. We run 232 routes a day. That actually, it's 232 buses. It's really about 700 routes a day that these bus drivers perform. We have 22 substitutes. 15 of those are on long-term routes every day. Of the other 7, 6 of them only want to work part-time. So basically that leaves us with 1 substitute a day. And so it's a challenge to get substitutes, and I'll explain that in just a little bit. We have some incredible bus aides that support some of our younger drivers that need a little bit of help and our SPED students. 302 buses, as you see what we have. About 60% of our route buses are air conditioned. By next year, it'll be around 70%. Other than North DeSoto, that's the best in North Louisiana, and it's actually one of the better ratios of anybody in the state. You can see we move about 13,500 passengers a day. We do. Daycare centers move 600 to 700. There are about 3,600 students in walk zones, and the rest parents bring them. On the bus stops, you can see that we have reduced our bus stops by about 700. Let me give you an interesting fact. In Boston, I was reading an article the other day, they have 646 buses a day that stopped 4,700 times, and the community is upset because they stopped 4,700 times. 646, they stopped 4,700. We have 232 routes, and we're stopping 4,762 times. And so just want to kind of put that in perspective. On our route times, we've worked hard to reduce our routes. So even though we have reduced routes, if you can see, it was 238 2 years ago, and it's 232 today. We've still been able to cut our time down so we can get our children to school quicker. We've done that on the SPED, and we're also, with our majority to minority routes, our DOJ-directed routes that we'll talk about in a minute, and our McKinney-Vento, which is our homeless route. So we have worked hard and worked with our attorneys and the DOJ to get those numbers down. Our challenges, very complex enrollment patterns. We have a traditional transportation model where we pick up, in the neighborhoods. But some of our other routes are very challenging. Our McKinney-Vento routes. We have a route that starts on the Webster Parish line and works its way into Central Park Elementary at 6:02. It's met by buses that cover North Caddo up near Oil City, and other buses that pick up homeless children west of the airport and down south of Caddo Parish. And those are all working their way back into Bossier Parish at 6:02 in the morning. And so those are our McKinney-Vento. We have majority to minority routes. So if certain students live in a predominantly African-American school district, and some of those students want to go to one that's primarily Caucasian, they have that authority, and vice versa. We have some Caucasian students that would like to go to other schools, and the DOJ directs us to move those students. We have our SPED transfers are a challenge. We have 36 SPED buses a day that run. 27 of those have to go to a transfer. So a student may live in South Bossier but needs to go to a North Bossier school. They're going to have to meet at a transfer site, transfer buses to move on. And we also have some challenging rural routes. We have routes in South Bossier that start in South Bossier that actually have to drive into Red River Parish just to drive back up into Bossier Parish because it's the only way to get there. And the same goes for in Webster Parish. If you're out around Bistineau, on the other side of Bistineau is part of Bossier Parish, but you can't get there unless you go into Webster to swing back around. We have some routes that start out near Cotton Valley that work their way in, and we have some routes that start out near North Webster, pretty close to North Webster High School, that's right on the line of Bossier Parish, that works its way in. And so all of this together, it becomes a challenge. I want to mention one more route in South Bossier. A route starts at the very bottom of South Bossier, works its way up, picking up elementary, high school, and middle school kids. It's met by a bus that comes in from Bistineau. They exchange students, go to Parkway, go to Elm Grove, and then work their way back down to Elm Grove Elementary. So we ask a whole lot of our bus drivers, and they get it done, and you can see the times that they get that done in. Traffic congestion with existing bell times is a significant challenge for us. The bell times in Bossier Parish Schools hasn't really changed a whole lot over the years, but the traffic just continues to get really, really congested. If you want to make a left-hand turn in Bossier Parish in the morning, Bossier City in the morning, and you're not at a light, it's probably not going to happen. No one is going to let that yellow bus in. And they certainly don't want to get behind it because they're going to be late to work. And so that's a challenge. We've worked with law enforcement on Barksdale Boulevard alone. We have one bus that has turned in 60 complaints this year for drivers passing the bus when the stop arms are out. 60 times. One time is too many. And that bus, it's happened 60. And law enforcement has set up all sorts of opportunities to prevent that from happening. We've even had the state police on our bus. We put a state policeman on our bus. He drove on our bus for 5 minutes and saw 7 deviations and said, "I've seen enough. I've seen too many cars driving around our buses where no one is looking at the road. All of them are looking at their phones." And so our drivers are having to be a defensive driver and managing the kids as well. Recruiting and retention is always a challenge. If you would like to be a bus driver, this is all you have to do. You have to come to us for about a week, and we'll train you in a class, or if you want to do it at night, it's 2 weeks. Then you can go to the DMV and take 4 skills tests. If you pass those 4 skills tests, then you can come back and we'll send you for a background check. If you can pass that, then we'll send you to get a physical. If you can pass that, then we send you off back to get a permit at the DMV. You can come back to us. You can drive with us for 20 hours, minimum 20 hours. If you're doing okay there, then we can take you and send you to a third-party examiner so that you can take a 3-hour driving test. And once you pass that test, you can go back to the DMV. You can get your license. Once you get your license, you can come back to us, and we'll put you on a bus driving with kids for about 20 hours. It's an incredibly complicated process, but it's a process that's needed to make sure that we have good drivers driving our kids. And once you become a driver, then you'll drive with us for about 6 months or so as a substitute, making about $78 a day. And so that's a challenge. Mechanics is another challenge. The other day, we had an opportunity to get a mechanic that we've been looking for a mechanic in the worst way. The guy was coming to us from one of the local dealers. The day that he was supposed to quit, the local dealer moved his salary from $62,000 to $80,000, and we pay $35,000 for our mechanics. And so it's difficult to get a diesel mechanic for about $35,000 a year. Parental support. This is what I would tell you here. When your children go home and you tell your children, "How did you do today in school? What did you learn?" All I would ask is that every once in a while you would tell your children, "How was your bus ride home? Did you sit in your seat? Was your back against the seat? Was your backpack in your seat? Or were you turned around and playing with all of your friends?" So just spend a minute or two helping us to make sure that our children are safe. Okay, so that's our challenges, but we also have lots of great opportunities. Always the opportunity to move 13,500 kids a day safely. We have the opportunity that we want to right-size our fleet. We have 300 buses, 232 are riding on routes every day. Ms. Smith asked the other day, "Well, what are you doing with the other 70? Well, 22 are assigned to activity drivers, 10 are assigned to field trips. Our SPED has special kind of buses for special situations, and so all of our buses are being used, but do we have the right amount of SPED buses, or do we have too many? The 84 passenger buses are kind of limited to in town. Do we need to maybe get rid of those and move to a different kind of bus? We predominantly have 66 passengers. We're going to 77. You can't tell the difference between a 66 and a 77. The idea is not to put more kids on the bus. It's to make sure that your children are more comfortable. The opportunity to be cost effective. I mentioned earlier that we have already reduced our routes by 6 routes over the last couple of years. And we'll continue to look for cost-effective measures to save money so that it can be put to better use in curriculum. For parts replacement, bottom line to that parts replacement is in the past 4 years, our budget has gone down 10%, but we have gotten 10% more buses, and we're still managing. And we do that for 2 reasons. We're able to do it for 2 reasons. One, because our bus operators are making sure that they're on top of what's wrong with their bus. And the second thing, I think we've improved our maintenance practices over the past several years that we're able to do that. The last thing here I want to talk to you about is eco-friendly. On the slide here, on this one, all I want you to do is look at those colors. The EPA rates our air quality in 5 different categories. In 1990, we were in Category 3. Then we moved to Category 2, back to Category 3 for a long period in Category 2. The good news is that this year we finally, according to the Shreveport Metropolitan Statistical Analysis, we finally moved to Category 1, which means we have clean air, which is good for business, it's good for our community, and so we feel like we need to play a role. Bossier City already has police and ambulances that run clean vehicles. The city of Shreveport, Sportran, we all know FedEx and UPS, all of those have moved to alternative fueled vehicles to make sure that the air that we breathe is clean. And so what we have done in Bossier Parish is we applied for a clean fuel grant. Louisiana has put out $12 million for 69 districts, and Bossier Parish has already been approved for over 10% of that money. And that's not enough. They say they have a little more money, so we went after 700,000 more. So hopefully in January we may find out that number may bounce to 2 million. How does that program work? We're going to take 25 dirty buses off the road, and we're going to put 25 clean propane buses in its place. And the state is going to pay for half of those buses, so 50%. What are the benefits of that? Obviously, you're going to get the bus for half price. The fuel for the buses is about 40% cheaper. Oil changes are 1/3 of the price. Maintaining them is a lot easier, and they're clean. One of those buses that we're going to get rid of emits the same amount of nitrogen oxide that 100 propane buses do. And so it's going to be much, much healthier. The secretary, Louisiana secretary for the Department of Environmental Quality said, I can't wait to come to Bossier to hand you guys this check, especially with the way that the alternative fuel programs are going. What's the bottom line? We want to reduce air pollution. We want to be a good partner with our government partners that have already done that, and as well as businesses. And we want to gain economic and operational benefits of a well-diversified force. Believe. Okay, Ms. Sonia, that concludes my briefing. Do you have some questions?
Again, these that are along the same lines. Will Bossier Parish address the extreme temperatures on its buses? What is the goal for having all school buses with air conditioning? And let me get to the other one. Why do kids have to sit on a hot bus when they are waiting to leave school when the bus is air conditioned?
Okay, let me take the second question first, and then you can help me out with that first question again. Why do we have children that sit on the ramp in hot buses when we have air-conditioned buses? Is that basically it? The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration requires us to have a no idling policy. So if you have buses that are air-conditioned and you have children on it, but you have some buses that are not air-conditioned and their windows are down, they're smelling all of that nitrogen oxide that is being, the exhaust that's coming out. And so the Safety Administration does not want you to idle your buses on the bus ramp. Okay, first part of that question?
Mm-hmm. Second part is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What is the goal for having all school buses with air conditioning?
The school board in 2011 started, all the buses that we purchased are air conditioned. And so, again, we have 60% now. We should be, with these 25, we should be up to 70%. And then as we continue over the next few years, we will manage to have our complete 100%.
Okay. Next question. Why can't kids who live close to the school ride the bus, especially during cold, rainy, and too hot weather?
That is a law. It's a Louisiana revised statute law, not just for Louisiana, by the way. There is a 1 mile walk policy that's pretty much standard across the nation. We are seeing changes in that. Many districts across the nation are going to 1.5 mile walk zones and 2 mile walk zones. But right now in Louisiana, it is a 1 mile walk zone. If you allow your children to ride the bus from a 1 mile walk zone, you are required to reimburse the state back all the transportation dollars.
So this may be a similar issue, then I don't know, but with so many scares of kidnapping, is it possible to shorten the distance some kids have to walk from drop-off points to their homes?
I mean, that's a Louisiana legislature question.
Okay. Next question. My child has been left waiting at the bus stop on a busy street. How are you working to improve communication on where buses are and if they will be late? And then there's another similar question. Is there a real-time app then that can locate the bus?
Well, we do have a remind if our buses are running late. Our technology department has implemented a remind system. If parents are signed up, by the way, they can go to the transportation website, and it will tell you how to sign up. Anytime the buses are running more than 15 minutes late, a text message is automatically sent to parents.
The next two questions deal with special education. Why do we send a special education bus and a non-special ed bus to the same house to pick up two different students? Why can't they all ride the same bus? And then the next question is, under IDEA, special education is required to be provided at school in their community. Why then are we transferring over 27 buses of SPED a day?
Well, really, I think I hate to throw some of this to SPED, but every school doesn't have the same programs. Am I correct? And so if certain autistic programs may be in one area, and so we're trying to transfer the kids to that area. We transfer the kids where the special education department tells us where we need to deliver them to. As far as why can't they ride the same buses, the federal laws require us to pick up the special needs children that are identified that need special transportation. Not all special education students ride special ed buses. Some ride on regular ed, but it depends upon what the special education department directs us to do.
Sure. Three final questions, and I don't know if you can address this as it is very specific, but how will you address picking up children in the Lakewood subdivision at 7:45 a.m.? This does not allow time for parents to make it to work by 8. And that may be something that you might have to address one-on-one.
Okay.
Who's asking the question
Yeah, it's
without
going to be
the
tough.
benefit of having your routing in
So that
front
the
of you.
parents can get to work in the morning?
By 8 o'clock.
Okay. That's a,
That might be better, a one-on-one conversation by calling your department
yeah.
to talk about that. Okay. Is it safe to have 3 kids per seat on the bus, even if they are small?
The manufacturer, the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards dictate the size of the bus. So the 66-passenger bus that you see up there, the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards say that is for 66 children. It's actually for probably 66 elementary children. When you start to move up, when we get into the middle schools, and I have some middle high kind of drivers here, once you start getting into middle school, you really, the driver has to be creative on how they seat the children. Am I correct on that? Yeah. So is it safe? The Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards say that it is. If their legs are out or if their cheek is out in the aisle, that's not safe. They need to be seated properly with their backs against the wall. Did I answer that pretty good? Okay.
Okay. If you can, please address bus drivers pulling off prior to children sitting in their seats, especially elementary students.
We try to avoid that. And my complaints investigation manager is back there. My thoughts are if the students are a little out of control, just a little, get them home. Don't be pulling over to the side. It's not going to make things any better. It typically makes things worse. But yeah, we will address that.
Okay. Very quickly, so in the nature of time, is there a plan to invest in charter-type buses for activities out of town?
Not to my knowledge. I think that's a little above my head, but I will tell you that Houghton High School is going to Lafayette today, and I think they've taken 3 charters and 3 school buses, airline is going near New Orleans, and they needed originally 8 buses. They couldn't find any charters. They had a hard time finding 2 charters. And so now we need to put the other students in Yellowhounds. And so the challenge is you have no drivers, because drivers, their first priority is to get the kids home. So let me tell you what has happened. Coaches from Parkway have stepped up, from Benton, from Airline, from Cope, from Houghton Middle School, a para at Russian, that has said, Colonel, if you need me, I'll drive a route. What we want to make sure what happens is that those children get to experience a playoff game. If they want to go, they can go. And I don't need to tell these folks, but the drivers that are working together to see how many kids they have on the bus so they can safely transport other kids home, there's a lot of people trying to work to make sure that our kids get to experience the things that they should have the right to do.
And last question, buses come and go to the Butler Educational Complex, yet transportation is not afforded to all. Parents are told they are sped buses. The students say otherwise, so if you could please clarify that.
Let's see, Miss Teresa, can you help with that one? Because that's really a student services kind of question. If we're told to deliver the students, we will, but certain students that attend Butler Educational Complex are not entitled to transportation. Is that? So if they have been removed from their home school, yeah, the parents are told that they have to provide their own because they were removed for a reason from that school.
Okay. Well, Colonel Haddon, thank you so very much for all of that valuable information.
Okay, thank you.
Our final presentation this evening comes from Planning and Construction. Norwood is the supervisor of that department, which oversees all of our school facilities, which, by the way, have increased over the years as a result of the exponential growth throughout Bossier Parish. So if you will, please welcome him, Keith Norwood.
Thank you. If you can't hear me at any point, raise your hand and I'll speak directly into the microphone. Thank you. Just a couple points I want to make as an introduction. The first one is you may notice a theme in these talks today that we do collaborate and we do consider the impact of what we do have on the student environment. That includes the facilities, something we've studied for years. Even though it's very difficult to have a direct correlation, we do understand, even though you may not be able to measure it directly, there's a relationship between the condition of the school facilities and the student's ability to focus and learn. So that is something that we're conscious of. And we also collaborate between departments on a lot of things on a daily and weekly basis to try to work some of those logistics out. I'm just going to go slide by slide here, and I'm just covering the highlights of some of the things we do in planning and construction. The first thing I thought I would mention, because it's very interesting and something that we didn't always have to do, is land acquisition. When we build new schools, which we are doing fairly frequently, if you look at us over the last 10 years, we build an average of a new school every other year. Well, the biggest challenge to that really is finding a suitable location for school. There's a number of factors that we have to consider. The first one is environmental factors like wetlands and flood zones, and the second one would be transportation, water and sewer. All those things have to be available, and it may be a direct cost to us. Transportation is an issue, and then another one we have to address is the demographics. We have to be sure that statistically our schools are balanced racially. We look at the parish-wide average, and then we also look at how we affect individual schools with those ratios. And so we make actual decisions. We'll look at scenarios of different school sites, and we'll weigh out not only the cost economically of the development to put in those utilities, water, sewer, streets, turn lanes is a big one, school zones. We'll also look at how it affects the parish demographically, and a lot of the decisions we make are based partially on that. Also, we collaborate with other governmental agencies, and I'll mention that a little bit more later on. What I do mostly is administer bond funds currently. Bond funds come from our property tax revenues. We borrow against our future revenues to fund the facilities now. What's interesting is even though we're having significant growth in our school system, the revenues that we are seeing aren't coming just from the residential housing. They're coming from casinos, they're coming from retail establishments, physical inventory, and also the oil and gas industry. So those are things that affect how we're able to fund our facilities. And our previous meeting tonight was to look at some of those issues and find the best way to fund our next round of construction. We also consider when we're doing these projects, the physical condition of the schools, which has to do with the age. The average age of our buildings probably is about 50 years, but we have some that are 80 or 90 years old or more that are still functional and maintained in good condition. We're also, as the school system grows, we need to add schools where that growth occurs so we can provide nearby neighborhood schools to these populations. And so we're looking at those growth needs. We have a demographer that helps us with our projections. Right now, typically, we will have updates every 2 or 3 years to our projections. We have new projections coming out very soon. And we have projections for the next 10 years. So for a 5-year, it's very reliable. For the others, for longer range, you have to be a little more careful about factors that could change. But what we're trying to do is to stay ahead of the curve. And I think that we've made a lot of progress over the last 10 or 20 years, because what I have personally seen is going from only being able to provide additional T buildings to being able to provide wings and new schools to meet these needs. And one thing that I think is a real milestone for Bossier is this year we're removing almost all of our remaining T buildings from the 3 schools that have had them either the most or the longest or both: Sun City Elementary, Benton Middle School, and the former Benton High School. Most of those T buildings are being removed right now. So I feel like that has been a major thing that we've achieved in the last 20 years. When we assess the sites, we look at the condition of the building, we look at how the facilities are being used, we looked at the population versus the number of students in the building, pupil-teacher ratios, and we're doing all of that, trying to make our resources go as far as we can, what we have available, to make the best use of our resources. And as you can imagine, a school building is not just a school building. An elementary school, even though it may look similar to a middle school, the functions are very different. Some of the spaces are very different, so we take that into account. And so what we try to do is, in projecting our needs and making recommendations, we look at the cost, including contingencies, the additional things that we need to do, like furniture. I recently was involved in a project with another agency where they were able to achieve funding for the building but not the furniture. Well, we tried to think of all those things. We have what I call the list that includes furniture, technology, which actually is a major component nowadays. Custodial supplies, lawnmower equipment, all those things are taken into account when we work up a total project cost, as well as contingency that will cover inflation. Average inflation may be 3 to 5% per year, so we have to factor that in. Next slide, please. I mentioned demographics. We've retained the services of a demographer. That's an expert, and he's actually an expert witness at times for the U.S. Justice Department. We felt like that gave us more credibility in how we address those concerns. We do it very carefully by taking our current population and aging those exact students into future years to see what schools they'll be going to, what the demand is going to be for classrooms, and then we also have growth factors that we add in that are based on building and housing starts and new subdivisions. We track all of those things. One thing that I alluded to earlier was the demographics of racially balancing our schools. We are currently under a consent decree for desegregation that dates back to around 1970. And so that is also a factor that we carefully consider to balance our parish-wide statistics and the statistics of the individual schools to maintain that balance. Another thing that is something that we've studied over the years is schools' functional capacity. 20 years ago, I had a list that was very simple: the name of school, the number of classrooms, and the capacity. And it was simply the number of classrooms times the number of students, pupil-teacher ratio, 20, 30, whatever. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. In studying our elementary schools over the years, we found that the very best we can do with the school that's approaching their capacity of being full is around 80%. And that's because you have planning periods, you have enrichment, you have remediation, you have other things that pull kids from the classroom, and they may need another classroom for a speech therapist or for special education or for art or for music. And so all of those things affect how effectively we can use our classrooms. When you go up to middle school and high school, I originally made the assumption it was similar, but what I found is because of other electives and block programming, the efficiency drops to around 70 or even 60%. So we have to understand that you can't put 25 or 30 students in every classroom, because at some point you're going to reach a point where every classroom's full, and you have to be aware of how we use our classrooms. We also have other areas that act as a teaching station, like a gymnasium or a library. Those are relied on a daily basis, and really I tell our designers now that you just have to think ahead, and if there's a possibility that a school may be faced with using an area for small groups or other instruction, go ahead and set it up for a classroom with technology and what they need to teach. Next slide, please. We spend a lot of emphasis on planning now because we are still in an active growth mode. A few years ago, the school board passed a resolution that was shared with all the local jurisdictions and municipalities and planning agencies to encourage them to include us in that planning process. That could be as simple as a developer getting with us before he sold all the lots in his subdivision. One thing that can be quite alarming is when you look at all of the subdivisions that are planned for Bossier, the hundreds and hundreds of homes, and where they're going, you have to consider where those students going to go to school. And so that's something that we try to take an active role in. I receive most of the subdivision master plans, and I share those with transportation so they know the new streets are coming. I share that with the administration so they're aware of the growth potential, and with our demographers so we can try to plan ahead. So, well, I think I've covered that slide, so let me go to the next one. One thing that I want to mention, because I noticed that when we have public meetings, this comes up in the planning process. We have a very comprehensive planning process. It's very open. We have meeting notices that come out on our board website. All the media outlets are notified. So you can know in advance what we're considering on our agendas. You can come and participate and ask questions and hear what we know when we make these decisions. And if we make recommendations to the school board to address these needs. And one question we always get asked is, what are we doing about the underutilized facilities? We get asked that by local agencies, and we get asked that by even federal agencies. And it's a matter of accountability, but I just want to remind you or inform you, if you don't know, that we have made some adjustments over the last few years to keep these centers viable. And part of the equation is, if you're providing services to different needs all over the parish, you may not be able to provide it at every school. And so you create these centers where the kids can be transported. And what you're providing in that center is you're providing a facility that's designed to meet that need, and you're also able to provide the instruction that's designed to meet that need that maybe you couldn't provide as well for one or two students in more schools. So you're pulling your resources together and being more effective. In about 2002, I think it was, we did a study, and then as a result of that study, we closed Butler Elementary, and those kids were moved into Bossier Elementary. Another thing that we did as a result of studies related to our last current bond program in around 2010, 2012 is based on mostly the condition of the facility. Charlotte Mitchell was closed as an attendance center, and those kids were moved into the Butler Alternative Education Center. So the most recent one that we've done was not directed necessarily by the quality of the facility, but just by a consistently declining enrollment. And we brought the students from Cary Martin to Plain Dealing to create or recreate there a K-12 center so that we could serve all those students under one roof. And so what we're doing in those cases, we're trying to make the most effective use of our existing facilities. Also, one thing that we've done pretty consistently is as we open a new school, we will repurpose the school that's been vacated. That's happened in Halton twice in the last 20 years. Princeton Middle School was vacated in 1999, opening the new Halton Middle School. Due to growth there, we have done that a second time, and we've opened a new Halton Middle School. And so we've opened Princeton Elementary and Halton Elementary in those former middle school sites. Likewise in Bossier, the current Elm Grove Middle School is located where Parkway High School used to be, and we have a new Elm Grove Elementary at the former middle school location. So we're doing what we can to make the best use of all those facilities. What happens with next year is we're opening a dual two-grade center at the former Benton Middle and Benton High School campus. It will be two separate schools located on those two campuses serving the middle school 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade levels. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned some of this before, but program management is a very big part of what I do and what we do in our department. We do outsource a lot of that. When we started this current bond program, which was our largest ever, the school system saw a need to outsource some of that. We have retained a program manager that helps us not only with programming our schools so we have consistently the same type of quality standards, regardless of which architects designs which school. Also, they actively help us monitor the budgets, and we're pleased to say we've done really well with that with the current program. We're staying well within our budgeted allotments for the projects. And they assist us with architect selection and with construction observation. Now, we are sometimes questioned about the additional expense of a program manager, and we ask that question ourselves. But as I told someone earlier today, what I observed from our previous program that ran from about 2005 to 2010 to our current program, which started in 2012, is we've shaved about a year off of our programming time with the help of our program manager. So with inflation being about 3 to 5% a year, that's a direct cost avoidance to the school system. So the program management really pays for itself, but it also provides some additional eyes and ears to everything that we do so that we're all about quality control. Another thing that we do is we collaborate closely with other departments on quality control. One of those key components is inputs from the maintenance department on what items that we put in our schools really work, are easy to maintain, or sustainable over a long period of time. One thing that we have a lot of questions about is timelines and budgets. Since we're in about year 7 or 8 of a 10-year program, there are a lot of projects that have been on the books for a while that haven't been accomplished yet, and that is really a matter of cash flow. We're able to sell bonds in lumps of 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, and we can continue that building program to keep the projects moving forward. Some of what we do is a factor of growth. The biggest emphasis for this current program was funding to eliminate those 2 buildings and provide classrooms. So that was a major component. But we also have other equity projects that we've done at schools that have needs, but not the growth. We've done some electrical upgrades in some schools to improve for technology. We've done some interior renovations with lighting and air conditioning and some other projects to try to balance out some of those other needs that are long-term and very real. Our primary source of funding right now is ad valorem, or property tax revenues, as I mentioned. Some of our other sources of funding may be low-interest government bonds. We've done those for renovation and new construction. And we have found other sources of revenue to do some projects, including the rare infrastructure grant, which it is very rare, but occasionally we'll find a way to fund something such as, sidewalk and improvements. There was a program called Safe Routes to Schools. That was a federal program administered through the State Department of Transportation where we could provide sidewalks, school zones, places for students to walk on campus to emphasize physical education and healthy alternatives. And so we really do everything we can to pinpoint sources of funding and take advantage of those. Some of the things or maybe energy related, like you mentioned about the buses. Next slide, please. I think I've already covered this slide in my previous comments, so just to rehash very quickly, you can go to our website that covers our projects for the bond program. It's administered by our program manager, SGB Yates and Sons, and it is called BossierSchools2012.com. There's a link to it on our regular Bossier webpage, but it gives you an overview of the current projects and what we've completed in the program, so you can see what we've done with the revenues and what we've accomplished. Next slide, please. One thing I also wanted to mention is we really do not operate in a vacuum. We're closely monitored by a lot of government agencies because the children that we have in our schools, they can't take care of themselves, and so whether it's the fire marshal or Department of Environmental Quality or another agency, a health department, we're closely monitored, so that's part of the equation in safe and healthy schools. But we also interact with our community in a lot of different ways. There is a document that's been adopted by some local agencies called the Bossier Plan, and it's for uniform and comprehensive development, and it tells the community how we can use our land. Zoning laws and building standards are included in that, and so we refer to that, and that gives us guidelines on how to be a good community partner. Also, we participate with planning. For example, the Bossier Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness are very involved in producing plans for emergency planning and response. And we collaborate with that, whether it is bus transportation or emergency shelters. That's something that we do in our community as a community partner. We have interagency agreements, and the purpose of those, which is supported by the plan, is to collaborate and help our resources go farther. One example is we recently collaborated with the police jury for asphalt to build road improvements around our Benton High School and asphalt overlays at several schools in exchange for a partial funding of those improvements and also a land exchange to create a new park in North Bossier on Kingston Road. And so because our mission is to build schools and not to build roads, other agencies may be set up better to perform that function. And so we collaborate with them and we share our resources to make those things happen. We also share buildings. There have been times when we've hosted events here. There have been times when other agencies have hosted events for us, like the Civic Center and graduations. And so, we are a good community partner, and we also collaborate with agencies to use our schools. We have a lot of agencies that meet in our schools on a regular basis or on an occasional basis. We have a policy on the use of facilities, and really all we're trying to do is to cover our cost, our operating cost, because we can't, just give the use away, but it covers our utilities and our custodial and cleanup. So a lot of folks take advantage of that, from beauty pageants to we've had the hayride here before. That was my last slide, but I'd be glad to answer any follow-up questions. If I mention something you'd like to know a little more, if you have a question on something I missed, I'll be glad to answer.
Combine these, and I apologize. I told you we were going to try our best to have you out in an hour, and I know that we're going a little over. We're going to try to go through this quickly. When will we see a new build for schools such as Bossier High, Russian Middle, schools that seem to be the forgotten schools? And then what determines a need for a new school build, if we could put those perhaps together?
Okay, that's a good question. First of all, I want to mention that when we did our facility assessment in 2011 with our program manager, some of our older schools are extremely well built. We try to maintain those standards, but for example, Bossier High, that is really a tank of a school. It's extremely well built. So our goal there is to maintain it, to keep it viable, to keep it functional. And we've done a number of things there, including updating the lighting, the restrooms, ceilings, the auditorium. Bossier has a new artificial turf field, which is the only one in the parish currently. And so we're doing, handicap accessibility in the stadium was the most recent project. We're doing what we can to keep those projects viable. Maintenance has had some initiatives with air conditioning, controls, lighting upgrades, a lot of things to keep those facilities viable. And as I mentioned too, if the need comes, if a facility's underutilized, we look at that too.
Any plans to expand Parkway? There are overfilled classrooms, crowded cafeteria, and 2 new special ed classes. They need more space.
The capacity of Parkway is around 1,470, and we're watching that closely. As I mentioned earlier, the efficiency of a high school is around 60 to 70%, so not every classroom is used every hour of every day. When we built Parkway, we took that into consideration, and we created on every hallway basically a team room for teachers to use if they somehow got displaced and had to float during their planning period. There's a lot of things that can be done, and I have to say that when I looked at these high schools, for example, Airline, they do a lot of very creative things to use space. They combine sections and grade levels of similar curriculum in the same room sometimes to save space, and it is something we have to actively manage. So I do acknowledge that we do have a ways to go, but to answer the question, in our long-range planning, we have plans on how we could expand most of these campuses as the need arrives, and we are tracking those needs.
Are there any proposed renovation projects for Green Acres Middle School?
I will say that currently not in the bond program, but some of those needs get addressed individually through O&M of plant operations and maintenance. We do several projects during the year through the maintenance department, including, as I mentioned, facelifts and lighting upgrades and technology improvements too. And you don't always see those because they're behind the walls or in the ceilings, but they really do happen.
And when will we see major upgrades to some of our older campuses like Russian, that you just addressed something similar to that?
Yeah, well, for example, I do know they're working on the lighting retrofit right now, and that's something that makes a major improvement on a school. We look at, with these improvements, how does it affect people on a daily basis? Or how, with the number of students affected, and the effectiveness of that expense. And so we don't have unlimited funds to do those things, but it is ongoing.
There are rumors of a new school in Benton. Are there plans for a new school?
Okay, that is a good question because I didn't specifically address this in my presentation. We are always aware of the need for future schools. We currently have 3 or 4 sites that we had obtained for potential future school sites. One is next to the South Bossier Park. One is next to Turtle Creek Elementary. One is in the near Vanceville Road and Benton Road, 4900 Benton Road, and we are always aware of that need. I would like to find another elementary school site potentially for the Halton area as they grow. So, we try to plan ahead. It's difficult always to know where the need's going to occur first, but we're watching that very closely.
How are the needs for autistic and other special needs students assessed when planning a remodel or a new build, such as sensory rooms, schools with washers and dryers, green?
We do as much of that as we can by collaborating during the schematic design phase. We'll have meetings with department heads and the individual principals with the departments such as special ed and curriculum, child nutrition, transportation, to try to address as many of those needs as we can right up front. And really, I think we're doing a much better job than we did in previous years where everything was just generic. Most of our schools now, depending on the programming for that individual school, will address a lot of those needs. We'll have small group areas that can be used. They may be used for something different every day of the week or at different times of the year. They may be used for assessments and for testing and for special education, enrichment, pull out. There's a lot of things that they're used for, but our school buildings are a lot more versatile than they used to be, a lot more specific, a lot more customized for those needs.
Final question, I'm going to roll two into one. What determines a need for a new school build, and what happens when demographics prevent schools from improvements that are necessary?
I may get you to repeat the second part of that in a minute, but to address the first part, we've had growing pains in the past where either we didn't have the funding or we couldn't keep up with the growth, and so we had to start moving T buildings in. And no one wants a T building, but if you have a choice of having one or not having one to manage things, then you'll take a T building. But what happens is you reach a point where you can't manage a large population on a conventional site. You have problems with your transportation, you have problems with serving that many students in a cafeteria of a limited size, you have the problem that your auditorium only will seat a certain percentage of your daily enrollment, events are a problem for parking, and so you get to a point where you have to split and create a new school to keep that manageable. And at the beginning of this program, we tried to set some goals, keeping that in mind, to increase an elementary design up to around 1,000. We had been running 700 or 800 before that, but we were reaching those numbers with a lot of the schools in Bossier, North Bossier. Middle school, our prototype was 1,500 students. That's what Halton Middle School is. And high school, we were shooting for 2,000 if possible, and that's what we used when we reconfigured Airline with the new wings. So we can't always, depending on the growth and the funding, we can't always provide that up front, but what we try to do is to have a master plan where we know as we grow, we have a way that we can grow with, with adding on to the cafeteria, adding on to the gymnasium, adding a classroom wing, those things that we need to do to keep that school functional, because what it comes down to is whatever we provide, there's school center administrators and principals that have to make that work.
Okay. And you said, to restate that second question for
Yes.
you, what happens when demographics prevent schools from improvement necessary?
I'm not certain I follow that question. Demographics, there's a couple things that demographics relate to. One of them is just sheer numbers and population. Another one is, since we're under a consent decree, as the federal government defines that, is strictly black and white ratios. They don't look at the other components. And so that's something that we're accountable for and we're mindful for, but I can't say that it's an inhibiting factor. What I've observed is in the past, and I'll give a specific example, the Justice Department came to Bossier Elementary and made a site visit, and they made some very good suggestions on how to improve the programming of that campus, and we were able to secure some additional funding and do some of those things, and that included a new library, a new office administration area, a new front driveway, and a new address. And it's something that, as that school had evolved, we had gone from an elementary next to a high school with the street down the middle to being one consolidated campus, and some reconfiguration definitely was in order, and we were able to accomplish that.
Okay. Well, Mr. Norwood, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
presentation. Keith Norwood. And that concludes tonight's town hall meeting. We hope that these presentations have been valuable and helped give you a better understanding of what all goes into the decision-making process in these three specific departments. As you can tell, there is a lot that goes into it. We know that you do have additional questions because we have a very large school district with many departments, and we can tell you that we are going to be having at least one other town hall meeting planned for this school year. And again, we want your input in that. So if there are certain areas that you would really like to suggest that we focus on next, feel free to fill out a suggestion slip and drop it in the comment box in the foyer. I put some slips out there on the table with the clear suggestion box. We'd love to hear from you, and if there are some, specific questions with your email address that you need to find out about specific policies, where to find that in Bossier Parish School Board policy. We do value your partnership. And again, we thank you for taking your time to be here tonight. Have safe travels.